Yangon International Airport smells like sweat and jasmine and fear. Sarah Mitchell stands in the security line, clutching a small canvas backpack against her chest, and her hands will not stop trembling. The bag feels heavier than it should. She tells herself it is just gold jewelry, antique pieces, nothing illegal really, just avoiding some export taxes. A favor for a friend. The fluorescent lights overhead flicker and hum. Somewhere behind her a child is crying. The line inches forward. She shifts her weight from foot to foot. The backpack presses against her ribs. Inside, wrapped in brown paper and sealed with packing tape, sits a package she has never opened. She was told not to. The security guard at the scanner waves her forward with a bored expression. Sarah takes a breath that catches in her throat and steps up to the conveyor belt. But this moment, this terrible convergence of choice and consequence, began 2 months earlier on the other side of Myanmar, when Sarah Mitchell still believed the world was fundamentally kind. She had been traveling for 8 months by then, hopscotching through Southeast Asia with a backpack and a camera and a dream of turning her travel blog into something real. Not famous, she did not need famous, just sustainable. Enough subscribers to justify staying on the road a little longer. Enough ad revenue to cover hostels and street food and the occasional splurge on a nice meal. Sarah was 29 years old and had spent most of her 20s in London working administrative jobs that paid the bills but hollowed her out from the inside. When her grandmother died and left her £12,000, Sarah did not think twice. She quit her job, bought a one-way ticket to Bangkok, and promised herself 6 months of freedom before real life reclaimed her. That had been 8 months ago. The money was almost gone. Myanmar was supposed to be her final stop. One last adventure before flying home to London and reality and the crushing weight of starting over. She had fallen in love with the country in a way that surprised her. The golden pagodas rising out of morning mist. The kindness of strangers who spoke no English but shared their food anyway. The sense that she was seeing something real, something not yet completely packaged for Western tourists. She stayed in family-run guest houses where breakfast cost less than £1. She rode local buses that broke down in villages with no names on any map. She documented everything for her YouTube channel, 3,700 subscribers who seemed to genuinely care about her journey. But the bank account told a story her heart did not want to hear. £300 left. Maybe 4 if she really stretched it. Credit card debt waiting back home like a patient predator. Her return flight was already booked for 2 weeks away. The adventure was ending whether she was ready or not. She was staying in a hostel in Bagan when she met David Chen, though she would not learn until much later that David Chen was not his real name. Bagan, with its thousands of ancient temples spread across a dusty plain, sunrise over ruins that had stood for 1,000 years. Sarah had spent the day climbing pagodas and filming B-roll for a video she was editing about hidden photography spots. The hostel had a rooftop bar, cheap beer and cheaper wine, backpackers from a dozen countries comparing stories and scars. She was not looking for company. She had her laptop, her footage, a cold tiger beer sweating condensation onto the wooden table. David approached with the easy confidence of someone used to being welcomed. Mid-30s, well-dressed in a way that stood out among the elephant pants and tank tops of the backpacker crowd. Dark hair, expensive watch, a smile that seemed genuine. He asked if the seat across from her was taken. She said no. He asked what she was working on. She explained about her channel, about trying to capture the real Myanmar before it changed. He listened in a way people rarely did anymore, asking follow-up questions, remembering details. He said he loved travel content that went beyond the usual tourist spots. He said he could tell she actually cared about the places she visited. They talked for 3 hours. He said his name was David Chen, and he worked as a gem trader, moving between Bangkok and Mandalay, buying jade and rubies from local miners and selling to dealers in Thailand. It sounded exotic and slightly dangerous in exactly the way Sarah found appealing. He talked about Myanmar's beauty and its pain, the military government's corruption, the way ordinary people suffered while generals got rich. He spoke with authority, but also compassion. When he mentioned helping local artisans bypass government export fees that were essentially bribes, it sounded noble. He was, he said, trying to create a direct pipeline between craftsmen and international buyers so the artists could actually make a living. Sarah found herself liking him, more than liking him. There was an ease to their conversation, a rhythm that felt natural. When he bought her a second beer, she did not object. When he asked about her plans for the next few days, she told him about Mandalay, about a temple she wanted to film at sunset. He said Mandalay was his favorite city in Myanmar. He said if she was still there in a few days, maybe they could meet for dinner. She said maybe. She meant yes. They exchanged numbers. He paid for her drinks before she could protest. Walking back to her dorm room that night, Sarah felt something she had not felt in months. A spark. A possibility. She told herself not to be stupid. He was probably just being friendly. But she checked her phone 3 times before falling asleep, hoping for a message. It came 2 days later. She was in Mandalay by then, staying in a guest house near the old palace walls. The message was simple. He was in town unexpectedly. Would she like to meet at Schwenendam Monastery around 4? She said yes immediately, then spent 20 minutes choosing an outfit, which was ridiculous because she only had 3 shirts in her backpack anyway. Schwenendam Monastery is made entirely of teak wood, intricately carved, dark and cool inside while the afternoon sun blazed outside. Sarah arrived early and waited on the steps, watching tourists and monks drift past. When David appeared, he looked somehow more real than she remembered. Less like a fantasy from a rooftop bar and more like an actual person. He wore linen pants and a white shirt with rolled sleeves. He smiled when he saw her. They spent the afternoon walking through temples. He knew stories about each one, history mixed with legend. A king who went mad, a queen who poisoned her rival. Sarah filmed some of it for her channel but mostly just listened. When the sun began to set, they found a restaurant with a view of Mandalay Hill and ordered too much food. The conversation flowed like it had before. He asked about her life in London, what she would do when she went back. She admitted she had no idea. The thought of returning to administrative work made her feel physically ill. David listened. Then, carefully, almost casually, he said he understood. He had worked in finance before this, corporate job in Singapore, good money but soul-crushing. Walking away was the hardest and best decision he ever made. Now he helped people, connected artisans to markets, made a living doing something that mattered. It sounded perfect. It sounded like everything Sarah wanted. Over mango sticky rice for dessert, David mentioned he was flying back to Bangkok in a few days. He asked where she was headed next. She said Bangkok, then London. He nodded. Then he paused, the way someone does when they are about to ask a favor, but want it to seem spontaneous. He asked if her flight was direct or if she connected through Bangkok. She said she had a layover in Bangkok, a few hours before her London flight. He took a sip of tea. He set the cup down carefully. He looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. He said he wanted to ask her something but did not want to make her uncomfortable. Sarah's stomach tightened. Here it comes, she thought, the proposition. The thing that seemed too good to be true revealing itself as exactly that. David explained that he worked with local artisans, goldsmiths mostly, families who had been making jewelry for generations. Beautiful work, intricate designs, real craftsmanship. The problem was Myanmar's export laws. The government charged obscene taxes on gold leaving the country, even artistic pieces, even small amounts. It was not about protecting national treasures. It was about extracting bribes from anyone trying to do legitimate business. These taxes were crushing local artisans, forcing them to sell only to domestic buyers at a fraction of international market prices. Sarah listened. She knew where this was going. David said he had a small collection of antique gold jewelry pieces, maybe 3 pounds total, handcrafted items from elderly artisans in Mandalay. He needed to get them to Bangkok to show potential buyers. If he carried them himself, customs would charge him thousands of dollars in export fees. But tourists, people traveling with personal belongings, they rarely got checked thoroughly. If Sarah would be willing to carry a small bag through customs, just personal items, nothing illegal, he would pay her $2,000, cash. He said it quickly, but not nervously, like it was a business transaction, which, he insisted, it was. Sarah's first instinct was to say no. This was exactly the kind of thing travel forums warned about. Never carry anything for strangers. Never take packages you have not packed yourself. But David was not a stranger anymore. He had bought her drinks and dinner. He had spent hours with her. And $2,000. $2,000 would erase her credit card debt. $2,000 would fund another 3 months of travel. $2,000 was the difference between going home defeated and going home on her own terms. She asked if it was legal. David smiled, not condescending but understanding. He said it existed in a gray area. Technically, tourists could carry personal jewelry up to a certain value without declaring it. This was just slightly over that limit. Customs rarely checked. Even if they did, the worst case was paying a fine, maybe $100. He had documentation for everything, certificates of authenticity, receipts showing values below the legal threshold. It looked completely legitimate. Sarah felt herself wanting to believe him. She asked what the jewelry looked like. David pulled out his phone and showed her photos. Gold necklaces with intricate filigree work. earrings shaped like lotus flowers, a bracelet with tiny bells that probably chimed when worn. They were beautiful. He swiped to another photo. An elderly man hunched over a workbench, magnifying glass strapped to his head, working gold wire with tools that looked medieval. David said that was Tin Mong, 73 years old, been making jewelry since he was 12. His son had died in the cyclone of 2008. His daughter-in-law and grandchildren depended on the income from his work. Without access to international buyers, the family was slowly starving. It was a good story. It was probably even true. Sarah wanted it to be true. She asked how it would work. David said he would give her the bag the morning of her flight, sealed and documented. She would carry it in her personal backpack through customs like any tourist with souvenirs. In Bangkok airport, his associate would meet her in the arrivals hall, a quick exchange, then he would give her the payment. Simple, low risk, helping people who desperately needed help. Sarah said she needed to think about it. David said, "Of course, take your time." He did not pressure. He changed the subject back to travel, asked about her favorite place in Southeast Asia, listened to her talk about a village in northern Laos where she had stayed for a week. When they parted that night, he paid for dinner and did not mention the money again. Sarah walked back to her guest house through streets lit by flickering neon and the warm glow of tea shops. She thought about $2,000. She thought about Tin Mong and his dead son. She thought about going home to London and facing the reality of job applications and studio apartments she could not afford. She thought about David's smile and how he made her feel interesting and capable. She told herself it was not really smuggling, just helping local artists. A technicality. Everybody did this kind of thing. She was overthinking. At midnight, lying in her narrow hostel bed, she sent David a message. 3 words. "Okay, I'll help." His reply came immediately. "Thank you. You're making a real difference." Sarah put her phone face down on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling fan turning slowly overhead. She felt relief and excitement and a small cold thread of doubt winding through her chest. She ignored it. She had made her choice. In 10 days, she would have $2,000 and a story to tell. Everything would be fine. Everything was going to be fine. The next morning, Sarah woke to a message from David asking if she wanted to visit some of the workshops where the jewelry was made. He said it might make her feel more comfortable about the arrangement, seeing the actual artisans and their work. She appreciated that. It felt considerate. It felt like he understood her hesitation and wanted to ease it with transparency. She said yes. He picked her up in a taxi at noon. They drove through Mandalay's chaotic streets, past markets spilling onto sidewalks and temples glittering in the harsh sunlight. David talked easily about the city's history, pointing out landmarks, telling stories. He seemed to know everyone. He waved to shopkeepers. A tea vendor called out his name. It all felt authentic. This was his world, his territory. Sarah filmed some of it out the taxi window, thinking it might make good content for her channel. The first workshop was in a narrow building down an alley that smelled like cooking oil and incense. Inside, 3 men sat at low tables working with blowtorches and tiny hammers. The heat was suffocating. David introduced her to the owner, a middle-aged man named Kothant who spoke broken English and smiled with gold-capped teeth. He showed Sarah how they melted gold in a small crucible, poured it into molds, shaped it while hot. His hands were scarred from burns. He worked with no safety equipment, no ventilation beyond an open window. David translated some of Kothant's Burmese, explaining that his family had been goldsmiths for 4 generations. The military government's taxes made it almost impossible to survive. Most of his children had left for factory work in Thailand. Sarah watched Kothant work on a bracelet, his weathered hands moving with absolute precision. She felt a tightness in her chest that might have been guilt or might have been conviction. These were real people doing real work. Helping them felt right. They visited 2 more workshops that afternoon. Each one similar. Small, hot, filled with elderly men doing intricate work for poverty wages. David knew all of them by name. He asked about their families. He showed genuine warmth. At the 3rd workshop, an old woman served them tea and small cakes, waving away payment. She gripped Sarah's hand and spoke in rapid Burmese, her eyes wet. David translated. She was thanking Sarah for helping them, for caring about their craft, for giving them hope that their work might reach people who would appreciate it. Sarah felt something shift inside her. The doubt that had kept her awake the previous night began to dissolve. This was not some abstract scheme. This was real. These people needed help. David was providing it. She was part of something good. Walking back through the market later, David bought her a mango smoothie from a street vendor. He asked how she felt about everything. She said honestly that seeing the workshops made her feel better about it. He nodded. He said he understood why people were cautious. The world taught you not to trust. But sometimes you had to take a small risk to do something meaningful. Sometimes the right thing and the legal thing were not exactly aligned. Sarah sipped her smoothie and thought that made sense. Over the next few days, David became a fixture in her life. Not overwhelming, not suffocating, just present. He took her to a lacquerware workshop where women painted intricate designs on wooden bowls. He showed her a jade market where dealers examined stones with pocket flashlights, looking for the perfect translucency. He introduced her to his favorite tea shop where they sat on plastic stools and drank sweet milky tea and watched the city flow past. He was building a world around her, a context where his request made perfect sense. He also prepared her methodically. One evening over dinner, he explained exactly how the exchange would work. She would receive the bag the morning of her flight. It would be sealed and wrapped as personal belongings. She should not open it because customs sometimes checked for signs of tampering, and if the seal was broken, they might ask more questions. The jewelry was delicate anyway. Better to keep it packaged safely. She would carry it in her personal backpack, not checked luggage, because gold items were sometimes stolen from checked bags by airport workers. This happened all the time, he said. You could not trust anyone. In Bangkok, she would clear customs and go to the arrivals hall. David's associate, a Thai man named Mr. Sumchai, would be waiting near the currency exchange. He would be holding a sign with her name. She would hand him the bag. He would give her an envelope with $2,000. The entire interaction would take 30 seconds. Then she could catch her connecting flight to London, and that would be that. Sarah asked what she should say if customs asked about the bag. David coached her patiently. Personal items. Gifts for family. If they asked her to open it, she should comply but act confused. Say a friend gave it to her and she has not looked inside. It is just some local handicrafts. The documentation attached to the bag would support this. He showed her a customs declaration form already filled out, listing the contents as personal jewelry and gifts. Total declared value under the legal threshold for taxation. It looked official. It had stamps and signatures. She asked what happened if something went wrong. David looked at her seriously. He said nothing would go wrong. But hypothetically, worst case, they might ask her to pay a fine for under-declaring value, maybe $100. He would reimburse her, of course. But honestly, he had done this dozens of times with different travelers. Customs rarely checked personal bags thoroughly. They were looking for commercial smuggling, big operations. One tourist with a small package barely registered. Sarah wanted to believe him. She was choosing to believe him. The red flag started small. 3 days before her flight, David asked her to change her booking to an earlier departure. 6 in the morning instead of noon. He said Mr. Sumchai's schedule had shifted and the morning arrival worked better. Sarah felt a flicker of unease. Changing flights would cost money. David immediately offered to cover the change fee, $200, paid in cash right there at the restaurant. He apologized for the inconvenience. He said he appreciated her flexibility. Sarah took the money and told herself it was fine. People's schedules changed. This was still a business transaction. The next day, he asked her to make sure she packed the bag in her personal backpack, not her larger hiking pack. Carry-on only, he emphasized. She asked why. He explained again about theft from checked luggage, but there was something in his tone that felt rehearsed. Like he had given this explanation many times. Sarah noticed but did not push. She told herself he was just being careful, protective of valuable items. That made sense. A different kind of red flag appeared when she suggested visiting the workshops again, maybe filming a short interview with one of the artisans for her channel. David hesitated. He said they were very private people, superstitious about cameras, about outsiders documenting their techniques. Other goldsmiths might copy their designs. Sarah accepted this, but it bothered her. Why show her the workshops at all if they were so secretive? But she did not voice this thought. She was already committed. Questioning now felt like betrayal. The biggest warning came from another traveler. Sarah had returned to her hostel one afternoon and was editing footage in the common room when an Australian woman sat down across from her. Emma, late 20s, covered in tattoos, 3 months into a year-long trip through Asia. They had chatted briefly before. Emma asked what Sarah was working on. Sarah mentioned she was leaving Myanmar soon, heading home via Bangkok. Emma asked if she was excited to go home. Sarah said not really, but she was out of money. Emma nodded sympathetically. Then, casually, Emma said she had heard Sarah talking to someone about carrying something through customs. She said it quietly but with weight. Sarah's stomach dropped. She asked what Emma meant. Emma said she did not mean to eavesdrop, But the hostel walls were thin, and she had heard Sarah on the phone with someone, talking about packages and customs. Emma leaned forward. She said she needed to tell Sarah something important. She said a girl she met in Vietnam, Swedish backpacker, had agreed to carry a package for someone she met in Hanoi. The person said it was electronics, avoiding import taxes. Seemed harmless. The girl got arrested at the Thai border with 2 kilos of heroin in her bag. She was still in prison. 15 years, maybe more. Sarah felt her face flush. She said defensively that her situation was different. She knew the person. She had seen the workshops. It was just gold jewelry. Emma's expression did not change. She asked how Sarah knew what was in the package. Had she opened it? Had she seen the actual items? Sarah said not yet, but she would receive it sealed with all the proper documentation. Emma shook her head slowly. She said that was exactly what they told the Swedish girl. Documentation can be faked. Workshops can be staged. People can be actors. Sarah felt anger rising in her throat. She said David was not like that. He was a legitimate businessman. He helped artisans. Emma asked how Sarah knew this. Sarah said because she had met the artisans, seen them working. Emma asked if David was there when she met them. Sarah said yes. Emma said so David showed you exactly what he wanted you to see. The logic was sound, but Sarah could not accept it. She said Emma did not understand. This was different. This was helping people. Emma sighed. She said she hoped Sarah was right, but she had been traveling long enough to see this pattern over and over. Charming person befriends naive tourist, builds trust, makes it seem noble or harmless, convinces them to carry something. Sometimes it is what they say. Often it is not. The risk is always on the carrier. Sarah stood up abruptly. She said she appreciated the concern, but she knew what she was doing. Emma said, "Okay, but please, just open the package before you carry it. See what is actually inside. Make sure." Sarah said she would think about it. She left the common room and went to her dorm, her heart pounding with anger and fear and something that felt like shame. She did not think about it. She pushed the conversation out of her mind. Emma did not know David. Emma did not understand the situation. Emma was just paranoid from too much time on the road, seeing danger everywhere. Sarah told herself this until she almost believed it. The night before her flight, David came to her guest house with the package. It was 9 in the evening. She met him in the lobby, a dim space with cracked tile floors and a ceiling fan that barely moved the hot air. He carried a small shopping bag. Inside was the package, maybe 5 pounds, wrapped in brown paper and sealed thoroughly with packing tape. A customs declaration form was attached to the outside with a paperclip, exactly as he had described. She could feel hard rectangular shapes inside, like boxes or cases. Could be jewelry, could be anything. David also brought cash. $1,000 in U.S. currency, rubber banded in a stack. He counted it out on the lobby table, 10s and 20s, while the night clerk pretended not to watch. He said this was half, as a deposit, showing good faith. The other half would come in Bangkok. Sarah took the money. It felt real in her hands, solid. Proof that this was a legitimate transaction. David went through the instructions one more time. Keep the package in her personal backpack. Do not open it. Customs might check for tampering. If they ask what it is, say personal items and gifts. Mr. Sumchai would be waiting in Bangkok arrivals with her name on a sign. Hand in the bag, receive the envelope, done. Sarah nodded along. She had memorized all of this already. He held her shoulders gently and looked in her eyes. He thanked her for doing this. He said she was helping real families survive. He said she was a good person and the world needed more people like her. Then he hugged her, a brief warm embrace that smelled like expensive cologne. When he pulled back, he was smiling. He said to text him when she landed safely. He said everything would be fine. After he left, Sarah sat in the lobby holding the package. The night clerk had disappeared into the back room. She was alone. The package felt heavier than 5 pounds. She turned it over in her hands. The packing tape was layered thick. The customs form looked official. Government stamps and signatures, item descriptions in neat handwriting, personal jewelry pieces, antique gold work, total value $800. She should open it. She knew she should open it. Emma's voice echoed in her head. Just look inside. Make sure. Her fingers found the edge of the tape. She could peel it back carefully, just enough to see inside, then reseal it. She would know for certain. She would be safe. But David's warning stopped her. Customs checks for tampering. If the seal is broken, they ask questions. The jewelry is delicate. Do not risk it. And something else. If she opened it and found jewelry exactly as David described, she would feel foolish for doubting him. If she opened it and found something else, something terrible, then she would have to make an impossible choice. Walk away from $1,000 already in her pocket, confront David, who knew where she was staying, involve police in a foreign country where she did not speak the language. Not opening it was easier. Not knowing meant she could still believe the story she had been told. Belief was safer than truth. Sarah took the package to her room and packed it carefully in her backpack, wrapped in a t-shirt for extra padding. She put the $1,000 in her money belt. She tried to sleep but managed maybe 2 hours, restless and broken. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Emma's face, heard her warning. She saw the Swedish girl in a Thai prison. She saw customs officers cutting open the package. At 3 in the morning, she got up and stood over her backpack. She could still open it. She could still save herself. Her hands hovered over the zipper. Just look, her mind screamed. Just look inside. But her hands did not move. Fear and hope and greed paralyzed her in equal measure. She had already spent the money in her mind. She had already decided who she was, someone who helped people, someone brave enough to take small risks for good causes. Opening the package would make her someone else, someone paranoid and distrustful. She did not want to be that person. She stepped away from the backpack. She got back in bed. She waited for dawn. When the sky finally lightened to gray, Sarah showered and dressed in her travel clothes. Jeans and a tank top and a light cardigan. She shouldered her backpack. The package pressed against her spine through the padding, a constant pressure. She could feel its weight with every breath. She checked out at a guest house and walked to the main road to catch a taxi to the airport. Yangon at dawn was quiet, the city still sleeping. A few street vendors were setting up food stalls. A man hosed down the sidewalk in front of his shop. The air smelled like wood smoke and frying oil. Sarah walked with her backpack heavy on her shoulders, rehearsing her story with each step. Personal items, gifts for family, nothing to declare. She tried to feel confident. She tried to feel like she was doing something good. Mostly, she felt numb, moving through the early morning on autopilot, carried forward by momentum and the weight of choices already made. The taxi appeared. She got in. She gave the driver the airport address. She watched the city slide past the window and thought about nothing at all. The weight on her back felt like gold and possibility. She had no idea she was carrying her own destruction, sealed in brown paper and wrapped in lies she had chosen to believe. Yangon International Airport at 5:30 in the morning is a fluorescent purgatory. Sarah stands in the security line and counts the people ahead of her. 7.65. Her backpack feels welded to her spine, the weight of it pressing into her vertebrae. She shifts it slightly and immediately regrets the movement. Drawing attention feels dangerous. She forces herself to stand still. The line moves. 4 people ahead. 3. Sarah's mouth is so dry her tongue sticks to her teeth. She tries to swallow and cannot. Around her, other passengers shuffle forward with the glazed expressions of people traveling too early. A businessman in a rumpled suit. A family with small children who whine about being tired. An elderly monk in saffron robes, normal people doing normal things. Sarah tries to mirror their boredom, their routine exhaustion. She is just another traveler. Nothing unusual, nothing to see. 2 people ahead. The security guard manning the X-ray scanner looks like he has not slept in days. His eyes are heavy-lidded, his movements mechanical. He waves passengers through with barely a glance. Sarah watches a woman place her purse on the conveyor belt. The guard looks at the screen, waves her through. The woman collects her purse and disappears toward the gates. Easy, quick, unremarkable. 1 person ahead. Sarah's heart is beating so hard she can feel it in her throat. The backpack seems to pulse with its own terrible life. She tells herself to breathe normally. She tells herself David was right. Customs barely checks personal bags. This is routine. She has done nothing wrong. The lies taste like copper in her mouth. The man ahead of her places his laptop bag on the belt, walks through the metal detector, collects his bag. The security guard looks at Sarah and waves her forward. This is it. This is the moment where everything either works or falls apart. Sarah steps up to the conveyor belt. She swings her backpack off her shoulders, and the sudden absence of weight makes her dizzy. She places it on the belt, trying to make the movement casual. The backpack slides into the X-ray machine and disappears behind the black rubber curtain. Sarah walks through the metal detector. It does not beep. She stands on the other side and watches the guard monitoring the screen. He is looking at something. His bored expression shifts. He leans closer to the monitor. He calls over his shoulder in Burmese. Another guard, older, wearing a supervisor's badge, walks over and looks at the screen. They speak quietly. Sarah cannot hear the words, but she can read their body language. Something is wrong. Something on that screen does not look right. The supervisor looks up at Sarah. He asks in English where she is traveling. She says London. Her voice comes out higher than normal. He asks to see her passport. She hands it over with fingers that have started trembling. He examines it, glances at her face, looks back at the screen. He says something to the younger guard who disappears into a back room. Sarah stands frozen. Other passengers are queuing up behind her, starting to look annoyed at the delay. The supervisor asks her to step to the side. She does. He pulls her backpack off the end of the conveyor belt and places it on the stainless steel table. He asks what is inside. Sarah recites the script David gave her. Personal items, clothes, gifts for family. Her voice sounds like it belongs to someone else. The supervisor asks what kind of gifts. Sarah says some local handicrafts, some jewelry. He asks her to open the bag. This is it. This is still salvageable. She can open it, and there will be gold jewelry, exactly as David promised, and she will feel stupid for being so nervous, and everything will be fine. Her hands shake as she unzips the backpack. She pulls out the brown paper package, the customs declaration form still attached with a paperclip. The supervisor takes the package from her. He reads the declaration form. He looks at Sarah. He asks what is inside. She says jewelry, gold pieces, gifts. He asks where she got them. She says from a friend, local artisan work. The lies flow automatically now, but they sound hollow even to her. The supervisor asks her to open the package. Sarah says it was given to her sealed. She has not opened it. The supervisor's expression changes. Something hardens in his eyes. He asks why she has not opened a package she is carrying internationally. Sarah tries to explain about the customs seal, about not wanting to tamper with it, but the words tangle in her throat. The supervisor cuts her off. He tells her to step back. 2 more security officers have appeared. They are not immigration guards anymore. They wear different uniforms. Police, maybe, or something worse. The supervisor takes a box cutter from his pocket. He slices through the packing tape with one clean motion. The sound of it, tape ripping, paper tearing, is the loudest thing Sarah has ever heard. He pulls back the brown paper wrapping. Inside are several bundles wrapped in plastic. Clear plastic. Through it, Sarah can see white powder compressed into dense bricks. The world tilts. The airport floor seems to drop away beneath her feet. That is not gold. That is not jewelry. That is heroin. That is 3 kilograms of heroin in her backpack with her name on the customs form and her fingerprints on the wrapping. The supervisor steps back. One of the police officers immediately radios someone. The other moves to stand between Sarah and the exit. The supervisor is saying something, but Sarah cannot hear him over the roaring in her ears. This is not happening. This cannot be happening. There has been a mistake. David said gold. David showed her the workshops. David held her shoulders and thanked her for helping families. David lied about everything. Sarah starts talking, words pouring out in a panic stream. She did not know what was in the package. Someone gave it to her. She thought it was jewelry. She has never seen drugs before. She would never carry drugs. This is a mistake. A terrible mistake. The supervisor tells her to be quiet. She cannot be quiet. She is explaining about David Chen, about the gem trader, about the artisans and the workshops, and the old man making bracelets. She's explaining that she is a good person who was trying to help. One of the officers puts his hand on her shoulder, not roughly, but firmly. He tells her in heavily accented English that she needs to stop talking. More officers arrive. They are cordoning off the security area. Other passengers are being redirected to different screening lanes. Sarah can see them staring at her. Some are taking photos with their phones. She is the story they will tell when they get home. The stupid foreign girl caught with drugs. She wants to scream at them that this is not who she is. This is not what it looks like. But it is exactly what it looks like. They handcuff her. The metal is cold against her wrists. An officer reads her rights in Burmese and then English. She has the right to remain silent. She has the right to an attorney. She will be taken to a detention facility for questioning. Myanmar law enforcement takes drug trafficking very seriously. She should cooperate fully. Sarah tries to say she will cooperate. She will tell them everything, but she is crying too hard to form words. Passengers in the other security lanes watch as she is led away. A woman holds her child's face against her chest so the child will not see. Sarah thinks absurdly that she is the monster now. She is the cautionary tale. The interrogation room is small and painted the color of old teeth. Sarah sits handcuffed to a metal chair bolted to the floor. 2 officers, a man and a woman, sit across from her. A translator stands in the corner. They ask her name. She tells them. They ask her nationality. British. They ask why she was carrying 3.2 kilograms of heroin in her personal luggage. Sarah tells them about David Chen. She tells them everything: the rooftop bar in Bagan, the workshops, the sealed package, the $1,000 currently in her money belt that they have already confiscated. They write it all down. They ask for David's phone number. Sarah gives it. They try calling. The number is disconnected. They ask for the address of the guest house where they met. Sarah gives it. They send officers to check. The guest house exists, but no one named David Chen has ever stayed there. They ask about the workshops. Sarah gives them the addresses from memory. Officers are dispatched. 2 of the locations are residential buildings with no goldsmith operations. The third is a legitimate workshop, but the owner, Ko Thant, denies ever meeting Sarah or anyone named David Chen. He says sometimes tour guides bring foreigners through to see traditional crafts, but he does not know their names. Sarah insists she met him. She sat in his workshop. He served her tea. The interrogators exchange glances. They suggest perhaps Sarah met someone who claimed to be Ko Thant. Perhaps the workshop tour was staged. Perhaps everything David showed her was theater designed to build trust. Sarah's mind reels. Could they stage an entire workshop? Could those artisans have been actors? The burns on their hands, the gold in the crucibles, the old woman who gripped her hand and thanked her? Yes, of course they could. The Golden Triangle heroin networks moved billions of dollars. They could stage whatever they needed to manipulate one naive backpacker. The female interrogator asks if Sarah has ever been to Thailand before. Sarah says yes, months ago. She asks if Sarah has connections to Thai drug networks. Sarah says no, of course not. The interrogator points out that the heroin was destined for Bangkok. Sarah was to deliver it to someone named Mr. Bangkok. Sumchai. Who is Mr. Sumchai? Sarah does not know. She never met him. David just said he would be waiting with a sign. The interrogator asks how much Sarah was being paid. Sarah tells them $2,000. The interrogator writes this down. She says $2,000 to carry heroin, worth approximately $200,000 on the street. Did Sarah really believe she was carrying gold? Sarah has no answer. When they say it like that, the stupidity is staggering. $2,000 to carry something worth 100 times that much. Of course it was not gold. Of course it was something terrible. She wanted so badly to believe otherwise that she ignored every warning, every red flag, every instinct screaming at her to open the package and look inside. The interrogation continues for 6 hours. They ask the same questions in different ways. They are looking for inconsistencies, for proof that Sarah knew what she was carrying. But her story does not change because it is the truth. She is guilty of catastrophic stupidity, but not knowing intent. Myanmar law does not care about intent. Possession is enough. Finally, they tell her the reality of her situation. Myanmar has mandatory minimum sentences for drug trafficking. The amount she was carrying, over 1 kilogram, qualifies for the death penalty. Lethal injection or hanging, depending on the judge's discretion. Even with mitigating circumstances, even claiming ignorance, the best she can hope for is life imprisonment. 20 years minimum. Maybe more. Sarah vomits into a trash can they provide. There's nothing in her stomach but bile. When she finishes retching, she asks to call the British Embassy. They say someone has already been notified. A consular officer will visit her tomorrow. They ask if she has family in the UK who should be contacted. Sarah gives them her parents' phone number and imagines that conversation. Your daughter has been arrested in Myanmar for drug trafficking. She is facing the death penalty. She starts crying again and cannot stop. They take her to a detention center on the outskirts of Yangon, a concrete building surrounded by high walls topped with barbed wire. Her cell is 3 meters by 2 meters. A concrete sleeping platform, a hole in the floor for a toilet. One other prisoner, a Burmese woman who speaks no English and watches Sarah with flat, incurious eyes. Sarah sits on the concrete platform and stares at the wall. This is real. This is her life now. The backpack full of heroin. The customs officers cutting through the wrapping. The moment she chose not to open the package because not knowing felt safer than truth. The British consular officer arrives the next day. Her name is Margaret, mid-50s, kind eyes but a mouth set in a grim line that suggests she has seen this before. She sits across from Sarah in a visiting room and explains what will happen. There will be a trial. The Myanmar legal system is not like the UK's. Trials are quick. Evidence is straightforward. Sarah was caught with heroin in her possession. That is all the prosecution needs. Margaret says they will argue that Sarah was an unwitting courier, that she believed she was carrying gold. This might spare her from execution. Might. The Myanmar government uses foreign drug cases as deterrents. They want to send a message that their country is not a transit point for international trafficking. Sarah asks what her chances are. Margaret does not sugarcoat it. Without proof of coercion or evidence against the traffickers who used her, Sarah will likely be convicted. 20 to 30 years in insane prison is the realistic outcome. If she is very lucky and there is significant international pressure, maybe 15, maybe. Sarah's parents arrive 2 weeks later. The meeting happens through glass in the detention center's visiting area. She has to pick up a grimy phone receiver to hear them. Her mother is already crying before Sarah says a word. Her father looks like he has aged 10 years. He keeps asking how this happened. How could you be so stupid? Sarah tries to explain about David, about the workshops, about needing money. The words sound pathetic. Her father says they have hired a lawyer, the best they can find in Myanmar, but the lawyer has already told them not to expect miracles. Her mother presses her palm against the glass. She says whatever happens, they love her. They will fight for her. They will contact politicians, human rights organizations, anyone who will listen. Sarah presses her own palm against the glass, trying to touch her mother's hand through the barrier. She says she is sorry. She says it over and over. Sorry, sorry, sorry. The word means nothing and everything. The trial takes 3 days. Sarah's lawyer argues that she was manipulated by sophisticated criminals, that she genuinely believed she was carrying jewelry, that she deserves mercy. The prosecution presents the heroine as evidence. They present the customs declaration form with her signature. They present testimony from the arresting officers. They argue that ignorance is not a defense, that every foreign trafficker claims they did not know, that Myanmar must protect itself from people like Sarah Mitchell, who enabled the drug trade even if unwittingly. The judge is an older man who listens impassively and asks few questions. When he delivers the verdict, guilty, Sarah feels nothing. She is beyond feeling. The sentence is 25 years in insane prison. Her lawyer immediately files an appeal. Margaret from the British Embassy says this is actually good news, that she avoided execution, that 25 years can be reduced with good behavior and diplomatic pressure. Sarah nods. 25 years. She is 29 now. She will be 54 when she gets out. If she gets out. Insane prison is worse than the detention center. Overcrowded, sweltering, disease-ridden. Sarah shares a cell with 11 other women. They sleep on mats on the concrete floor, packed so tightly that turning over means coordinating with your neighbors. The food is rice and watery soup once a day. Dysentery is constant. Violence is common. Sarah learns to keep her head down, to speak when spoken to give up her extra food rations to the cell boss who controls their small hierarchy. She has been an insane for 6 months now. Her parents visit once a month when they can afford the flights. They look more broken each time. Her father has aged into an old man. Her mother brings letters from friends back home, carefully cheerful messages that make Sarah want to scream. Her YouTube channel is frozen at 3,700 subscribers, the last video she posted from Myanmar showing golden temples and smiling faces. The comments are a mix of concern and judgment. Some followers asking what happened, others calling her stupid, others saying she got what she deserved. At night, lying on her mat listening to the other women breathe and cry and curse in languages she does not understand, Sarah thinks about the moment she almost opened the package, her hands hovering over the tape, the choice that would have saved her. She thinks about Emma's warning in the hostel common room. Just open it and make sure. She thinks about every ignored instinct, every rationalization, every lie she told herself because believing felt better than questioning. She writes letters sometimes, though she has no way to send most of them. Letters to her parents apologizing. Letters to her younger self warning her. Letters to other backpackers who might be approached by charming men with opportunities that seem too good to be true. She writes that trust is not a virtue when it ignores evidence. She writes that desperation makes you vulnerable to people who are very good at identifying vulnerability. She writes that there are men like David in every city in Southeast Asia, men who target travelers like her, people far from home and running out of money and hungry for one more adventure before reality reclaims them. She learns from other prisoners that she is not unique. There are 4 other foreign women in Incheon on drug charges. A German woman who thought she was carrying designer handbags. A Canadian who thought she was carrying rare textiles. An Australian who thought she was carrying gemstones. All of them met charming men. All of them were shown elaborate stories. All of them chose to believe. All of them are serving 10 to 30 years. The system works because the recruiters are patient and the targets are predictable. Backpackers at the end of their trips, money running low, eager to extend their adventures. Young people who believe they are savvy travelers when really, they're just tourists with backpacks. The recruiters build trust through time and attention. They show you what you want to see. They make you feel special, chosen, part of something meaningful. Then they give you a choice that feels safe, and you take it because you have already decided who you are. Someone brave, someone who helps people, someone who takes calculated risks. Sarah knows now that nothing about it was calculated. She gambled her life on a story she wanted to believe, and she lost. The heroin in her backpack was never gold. The artisans were never real. David Chen was never a gem trader. He was a recruiter for one of the largest heroin operations in the Golden Triangle, and Sarah Mitchell was just another transaction, another disposable foreigner willing to carry death across international borders. In her cell, she still dreams about the weight of the backpack pressing against her spine as she walked to the airport. In the dream, she knows what is inside. She has always known. But she keeps walking anyway because turning back requires admitting she made a terrible choice, and forward momentum feels easier than facing truth. She walks, and the backpack gets heavier, and she can feel the heroin inside transforming, becoming lead, becoming stone, becoming the crushing weight of consequence that will bend her spine for the next 25 years. She wakes in the dark, pressed between sleeping women, and remembers the brown paper package in her hands that final night in the guest house. The tape under her fingers, how close she came to opening it, how she chose safety over knowledge and paid for that choice with her life. There are lessons here about trust and desperation and the way hope can blind you to obvious danger. There are lessons about how ordinary people make catastrophic mistakes when they are vulnerable and isolated, and someone offers them exactly what they need. There are lessons about the predatory nature of international drug trafficking and the expendable bodies it consumes. Sarah Mitchell has 24 and a half years left to learn these lessons thoroughly. The other prisoners call her the Gold Girl, the stupid Farang who thought she was carrying jewelry. At first it stung. Now she accepts it. It is who she is. The girl who trusted a stranger because he made her feel special. The girl who ignored every warning because she needed money more than she needed truth. The girl who chose not to open the package because not knowing felt like protection. In her cell, Sarah Mitchell still remembers the weight of that bag against her spine, how it pressed into her back as she walked toward the airport that dawn morning. She thought it was the weight of gold and possibility, the weight of $2,000 and a few more months of freedom. She did not know she was carrying her own death sentence, wrapped in brown paper and sealed with lies she had been desperate enough to believe.